Hey guys, welcome to another episode of DarshanTalks. I'm here with the famous, the one, the only Alec Burlakoff. I'm excited because this is, I think, our fifth one with Alec. We've done multiple conversations. A lot of them are focused on his journey. And then we lined it up with essentially what happened when the subpoenas came. He was working with a company that got subpoenaed because of some of the work he did. But Alec, do you want to sort of set the stage before we jump in?
Well, I mean, as you know, I basically built my career in pharmaceuticals, and it's always been an aggressive way in which you had to go about things to be, a top performer. The majority of people just kind of, coast. But there's a very small percentage that carry the company in every company. I took pride in being part of that percentage, part of that group. But there's a price to pay ultimately. At least for me, there was, and several others in the company that were in that kind of upper echelon. And as an executive, after a few years of flying high, things started to take a turn for the worse. It was pretty commonplace to have a civil attorney to protect you. But eventually I got a call from my civil attorney letting me know that it was in my best interest to get a criminal attorney. And I did. And then the waiting game began until the waiting game was no longer, meaning that the authorities came in hard, came at my door and came in probably a group of 5 or 6, guns blazing, and ultimately, obviously, I surrendered, obviously, and they cuffed me, took me in, and then the real story began. The after.
So I want to explore that a little bit further before you say that. There was that movement from the civil attorney to the criminal attorney. How did you have your own, or did you have one in common with the other defendants?
The civil attorney I had in common with the other defendants.
Okay.
The criminal attorney was my own.
Now, how did you find him or her?
The company, head counsel at the company, gave me a short list of people to interview, and we interviewed together. And ultimately came to a decision as to whom we thought would be best, and we moved forward.
Now that's interesting, right? Because you were at this point, you told me in the previous interview, you didn't know what to make of this, because you knew that the moment they said you need to get your own attorney, you were possibly in trouble. I'm trying to place this in timelines, because you actually said the moment they canceled your contract, you knew you were in trouble.
Yeah, that was far later.
Okay.
Yeah. That was probably maybe a year later that they actually canceled my consulting agreement. I probably went a full year with a criminal attorney on board, doing my normal job, hoping that they wouldn't, hoping they wouldn't elevate me from a subject to a target. There's always that possibility, right? That they might not move you to a target.
So do you know what sort of pivoted to go from subject to target?
No. I mean, in hindsight, if you talk to the authorities, they will tell you that I was going to be a target, from day one. I don't really think it was much of a decision-making process. I think it was just a question of time.
What I think is interesting is one of the other things you mentioned to me was the 3 people who landed up paying the going to jail part of the price was the founder, the CEO, yourself.
Actually, there were 6 or 7.
That was going to be my question, and I've purposely not gone and looked at the news or anything like that because I want to hear the story from you. Did marketing get pulled, or was sales pulled out specifically?
As far as being indicted,
in terms of being targeted, in terms of being targeted by
sales and marketing were looked at. Marketing, ultimately, the vice president of marketing was not indicted, but from my own point of view, I can only tell you from my point of view. He had resigned from the company, at some point, and it seemed to be soon enough to allow the authorities to decide that they weren't going to indict him.
So you think it was a question of when did they leave the company, not a question of what damage they'd done before they left?
It's both that goes into the decision-making process. I think that, if he had stayed, he definitely would have been indicted. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Because he left, he wasn't. But as far as I'm concerned, Alec Burlakoff, I think whether I had stayed or left, I would have been indicted because I was the head of sales. And, there's just no way around it, quite frankly. You can't be in sales and lead 500 direct employees and move that type of business and have that type of revenue and not be indicted. I just don't see it happening.
So we've now come to the point where you described yourself as having restless nights. You were having some sort of emotional upheavals, emotional struggles, all that good stuff. Do you find yourself in a place where I guess you're now in a small office room talking to the U.S. attorney or talking to assistant U.S. attorney? Did that ever happen, or was it always through intermediaries, through the attorneys?
There was a pivotal point after I had been indicted and come to the realization that the others that were indicted alongside me were going to use me as the whipping boy and basically turn against me. Specifically, the owner of the company. I just knew, again, at this point, they had already cut my consulting agreement. So the writing was on the wall that it was no longer going to be a joint defense. I actually, I let my attorneys go because the attorneys were being funded by my company and I felt that there was a conflict of interest. So I let them go, which may or may not have been a bad decision, but where I definitely made a bad decision was I decided to go and speak to the government by myself.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So talk to me about that. That's a interesting decision.
It's a terrible decision. Let's call it what it is. But, at that point, I just threw caution to the wind. I was basically beat 10 ways to Tuesday. There was no positive end to this. Thought that they might want to hear my side of the story. It's public knowledge that, the government had drawn the conclusion that, I had basically wasted their time for a number of hours and essentially lied to them. What I did was I told the story, mostly truths, but, try to do everything in my power to keep myself out of the one that would be responsible or to blame. I had a lot of, I wasn't where I am today, not even close. I wasn't ready to accept responsibility. I had a lot of ill feelings and blamed the founder, the owner, for everything. He definitely was, the buck stopped there. He was the one who made the final decision, but I went along with all the decisions, and I'm a grown man. So I know now that I'm, responsible as well. And I took responsibility ultimately before everyone else did by pleading guilty. But it was a long road to get to the point where I came to realize that, it's like when you're a kid, if somebody tells you to jump off a bridge, are you going to do it? I looked at the owner as, a god. He was the first billionaire that I ever had a chance to work for. I was super excited to have that opportunity. I thought that in some way, shape, or form, I could share, just a microcosm of that success, and was willing to jump off the bridge for him or do anything of the sort. But again, if you're willing to do things for somebody that are illegal, then you're a criminal. And so ultimately, I got a new lawyer, and he basically told me that it's time to face the music and own up and begin to heal. And he basically said, "You're going to plead guilty." And I just looked at him and said, "Yeah, I guess I am." So
that's interesting. I didn't realize there are two pivotal moments I want to get into before we can talk about how you got into like jail and that element of it. One was this idea that you went in and you spoke to the government. That's a really dramatic moment, because I can just imagine being the government going, "Wait, I'm sorry, Alec Burlakoff is calling me and wants to come in and just sit down and confess. Like, I want to hear this."
Right. I mean, disappointed when I didn't come in and confess. I probably not disappointed, probably just disgusted. But yeah.
So you were a social worker, so you probably know about the 5 stages of grief. So there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's very clear you're at acceptance right now. It's very clear at one point you were at denial. In the middle, there's obviously anger, bargaining, and depression. You were clear that throughout you were feeling depression, which really leaves anger and bargaining. So what was your goal when you walked into the attorney's office? Was it anger or bargaining?
It was primarily anger. I was so angry. I had given my life to this job. I had sacrificed in so many areas, with the aspirations of being successful and accepted and rewarded. And, I realized that none of those things were going to happen, and that I had put it all on the line for the wrong guy, and for the wrong cause, for the wrong purpose. And I was, in the stage of just blaming everyone, and denial. The denial was kind of a laissez-faire thing. I mean, I knew that I was in trouble and that I had made bad decisions, but I was blaming someone else for my bad decisions. And no one wants to hear that. And I know that now.
So you walked in, you said all these other people did it. These guys, how long were you in there?
I'm going to guess 4 or 5 hours.
Wow. So it wasn't even like a 15-minute, I just want to tell you, here's everything that went wrong. You went in there, guns blazing, for 4 or 5 hours, talked to an assistant U.S. attorney going, everyone else is wrong, I'm right, here's who you should be going after. And name names, if you will. I
don't know about that. I mean, I actually tried to protect everybody.
Okay.
But the founder, because I felt that we were all in the same boat. I felt that we were all victim of his ways. But regardless, in the end of the day, I came in there. I felt that he should pay the price, and that he should have protected us, and he should have had counsel and attorneys, and he should have taken the necessary measures that what takes place in most companies. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still upset. I don't think I could have learned this lesson and become the man I am today had things not gone exactly the way they've gone. But when I look at like Purdue and the Sackers and all these other companies, and the fact that no one has gone to prison, clearly because they've had attorneys in place and so forth, it still makes me sick. But what happened to me was supposed to happen to me. There's a lot of victims, patients and so forth, who fell victim to addiction or even worse, families. And, they want to see somebody pay the consequences. And I mean, it's just like, you go down the highway and everybody's doing 75 when they're supposed to be doing 65. The guy who's doing 90 and he's swerving in and out of lanes, that's the one that the police officer is going to pull over first. I mean, somebody's got to pay. They can't pull over everybody. So, I'm one of those guys. But at that point, I really didn't think. I actually thought I was the only one that was going to get indicted at that point. Because I was the head of sales and everything. Everybody was pointing the blame at me because they didn't even know what went above. They didn't even know what went on above me. They weren't privy to the conversations or any of the decisions that were made. And they were very naive to think that I would have that decision-making power. But the people that work below me, I cared for those people. They worked hard. And, unlike the guy who I worked for, I cared for the people that worked for me and the decisions they made and the sacrifices and so forth. So I went in there guns blazing, protecting everyone.
Great.
They were my team. I felt that my team was let down by the owner, and that he was just basically going to throw us all to the wolves as shark bait, in exchange for to be left alone. And I felt that story needed to be told. So and ultimately in 2016, when we were all indicted, he was not indicted. So his plan seemed to have worked, to protect himself. But a year later, they indicted him. So I guess they decided that they wanted more and felt confident that they could get a conviction.
You then got another attorney who basically just said, time to throw your hands up, time to admit you're guilty. Was it more at that point a question of you just needed another third party to tell you this, or you already knew this was coming, or like what was the point of that attorney at that point?
It was all of the above, but this guy was just a different demeanor, different way to speak, matter of fact, not a showy man, not about, hey, let's go to trial and put on a big show and we can win this. He's just very pragmatic and spoke a language that I could understand and respond to. But I was also exhausted, tired of, thinking about what it would be to fight and the fact that fighting would ultimately mean lying. I mean, not that I was going to take the stand and lie on the stand, but just sitting there.
Right.
Throughout the trial, the defense, in my opinion, as opposed to accepting guilt in some way, shape, or form, is continuing to lie, be in denial. The fact that I would even go to trial. And I just didn't see myself doing that.
So then you sort of admitted guilt, and admitting guilt usually is going to be you signing some paperwork saying I concede. You made a mention of they put you in handcuffs. How did those two pieces line up? So when you signed that paperwork, did someone sort of show up in the office at that moment with handcuffs, or is it they tell you show up to prison on this date? Like, how does that play itself out?
Oh, well, when you're indicted, you're put in handcuffs, right?
Okay.
And then you go in and you get processed and you come out on bail. And then, years go by. I was indicted in 2016. I went in 2020. I was sentenced in 2020. But I wasn't in handcuffs. Excuse me. I wasn't in handcuffs for years after that, just for that, that instance. And then I pled guilty. And then 2020, I went in and got sentenced. And then they give you a self-surrender date, unless they think you're a threat in some way to flee the country or who knows. They give you a self-surrender date. And then you get in the car, I said goodbye to my kids, got in the car with my wife, drove like 2 hours down to Miami from where I live and walk in, and that's the end of it. It's a whole new world that you just walk into.
Now, before we explore that piece of the world, one of the things you also mentioned to me was you owe the government something like $56 million. Is that right? I may have the number wrong.
I have restitution. 59 and something, 59 million in restitution, co-responsibility with the CEO and the founder of the company.
Right. So 59 million, is that during the time you admit liability, you admit guilt? Is that when you signed that, or did you try to negotiate that, or was that sort of it is what it is.
That actually came after sentencing. She sent the judge sentenced me, and then there's a process that goes on after the fact, and I'm made aware of what that number was.
Okay, so there was no negotiation. This was part of sentencing itself.
I mean, maybe behind the scenes. I really don't know.
Okay.
I don't really know how that goes, to be honest with you.
Wow. So you land up in a scenario where it didn't even matter. You were just sort of where you are, if you will.
The thing on my mind is not money. It's time to stop thinking about money. It's time to start thinking about, what it's going to be like to serve your time, and how are you possibly going to come out on the other end a better man, and how are you going to keep your family intact if possible.
So let's talk about that. So you kissed your kids goodbye. What was that feeling like? The kids probably had questions. How did you prepare them for this conversation?
The kids were devastated. They were hysterically crying. They were on the balcony, literally, hysterical, could barely stand while I pulled away. And it's a very uncertain moment. It's very, very traumatic. And it affects my kids to this day. There's a Chili's by the prison where they used to come visit me at, and my daughter just the other day said, I'll never eat at Chili's again, because that's where they would eat after they, finished visiting with me. It'll be with them for the rest of their lives. It's words can't even express, what it's like to be free one day and, living, a good life, and then to be taken away from all the people you love. I mean, the hardest part about going to prison is being taken away from the people you love.
But talk to me about those conversations with your wife as you were saying goodbye. Because you were gone really for what? You said 10 months, was it? I forget.
I was in for 10 months, and then I was in a halfway house for 9 where I couldn't have visitors, and then 3 months on house arrest where I could have visitors. I wasn't gone that long, but, I think my ex-wife had decided that it was over many years before I went to prison, and that she just didn't know how to do it, and didn't know if she wanted to do it to me, at that point where things were so difficult already. I think that she stayed in it as long as she could out of compassion and kindness, and just felt there's no right time, there's no good time to divorce your husband of 22 years, but I think she felt that for her, the best time was to do it just after I got out of prison.
Right. So you're now in prison. You walked in. Talk to me about what that process is like. So they fingerprint you. They already fingerprinted you before. Do they do it again? How does that work?
They do again. Yeah. Listen. You show up, and you know from the moment you walk in the door that everything is different. It's just very cold, and it's very systematic, and you just right away know that you have no rights, and you're an inmate, you're a number, and that you're going to do exactly what they say when they tell you to do it, or you're going to exacerbate your situation even worse. I mean, it's bad, but it can get a lot worse. Any infractions, any problems whatsoever. I mean, more 99% chance it's going to result in you going to solitary confinement, and then most likely being transferred to a higher security prison. So, you really have to be smart and diligent. There's a saying in prison, you got to be on point. Didn't even know what that meant, but I mean, you hear it a lot. Hey, Alec, you got to get on point. You got to be focused, and just as on point as you possibly can, because if not, there are very different rules in prison. I went to a minimum, and so I can only speak to that. But I will tell you that the people in the minimum, most of them have worked their way down from maximum, medium, and low. So it's not like you're in a prison with people who just committed white-collar crimes. There is no such thing as a white-collar prison. There's such thing as white-collar crime, but not white-collar prison. And so the majority of people that you're in there with have worked their way down, which is great, because that means they haven't been in trouble in quite some time. and they're not the same people that they probably were when they came in, but they are those people, and they expect you to conduct yourself a certain way. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences for that. So you have to learn very quickly, and you do. You learn on your own, but you find one or two guys that is willing to kind of take you under their wing and help to make sure that you learn.
Wow. Oddly
enough, I actually fell in with the Cubans, and that's who I spent my time with. And I don't think that would have been the case had I been in a higher security prison. And I'm sure that there were people even in the minimum that maybe just kind of frowned upon it, thought it was a little weird, but there is an inherent difference between a minimum and the others. The people in there just aren't as institutionalized. But I will tell you that, for me, it seemed like 75% of the people had worked their way down from higher security prisons. So, they'll tell you like how lucky you are and how good you have it and how easy this is. And so that's good to know, right? But there's still nothing easy about being taken away from the people you love the most.
So you used a couple of terms. For example, you used the term institutionalized. What does that actually mean to you?
Well, again, it's not applicable to me because I wasn't in line enough. I can only observe it. But the people that are institutionalized, you can see that there are people that are just really comfortable. It's almost like this is where they thrive. They have a system for everything. The way they fold their clothes, the way they iron their clothes. People iron every day. The way their workouts, their haircuts. Some people cut their own hair 3 days a week, every 3 days, every 7 days tops. Cleanliness is just critical. You have to be. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to do fine in prison. You're extremely OCD. You're very clean." I had to change everything I did in prison because I was a slob compared to the way people are. The way you make your bed, the way you fold your clothes, the way you do your sheets, the way your locker is set up, all labels coming out, everything lined up. Everything has to be perfect, and if it's not, that's a problem. Everything's very systematic. The people that are institutionalized, they're very comfortable in their environment. For me, I woke up every day and I was just like, I just got to get through it. But for them, I don't think they think that way. I made a couple of good friends that, the guy that I would consider my best friend was, he's in 9 years and he just got in trouble. He was supposed to be getting released on halfway house any month now. He just got in trouble and he got another year. And, to him, it's just like, it's okay. Like, it's just, it's amazing just how these people are able to, I know people that have been in solitary for long periods of time that you wouldn't believe me because it's not supposed to be. And they do fine, a 5x8 cell by themselves. They're very happy. I hated being in a cell. I was in a cell for COVID, for quarantine. But if you're institutionalized, you probably prefer it. You like to be alone and not share anything with anybody and so forth and so on. There's a very big difference between someone who's institutionalized and someone like myself, who, thank God, fortunately was not there long enough to say that I was anywhere close to being institutionalized.
The one of the things they always talk about prison is this idea of you see the world passing you by. Again, you were only in it for 10 months. Did you still have that feeling, or?
Yeah. No, I walked every day in the yard. I walked around this very small area, this fence, this wired fence, and I would look up outside the fence and I would see cars and things, and I just remember thinking, like, this is crazy, like, this is insane. And I would think about the people that were there for years or decades, and what that, must have done to them. I mean, in some ways, of course, it made them extremely mentally tough, but in other ways, it had to have impaired them negatively. I do a lot about not just thinking about myself, but thinking about others. I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that have done time, that have served time. I don't respect them for the reasons in which they were forced to serve time, obviously. But I do respect them for the way in which they're able to conduct themselves in a certain manner while they're serving time, because there's something to be said for that. It's not easy. And there are people who do this, in a way that almost, to me, it's just truly amazing. It's symbolic of strength in every way. I believe that many of these people will come out, contrary to popular belief, I believe many of these people will come out and do great things. I personally know some of these people. Now, others, of course, they're going to, the recidivism rate is extremely high. I'm aware of that. But people that I spent my time with were definitely people whom I felt were moving, in a positive direction. Those are the people that I wanted to be influenced by, and maybe even have some influence on them as well, which I believe I did. For me, everyone kind of has a task in prison, something that they do, whether it's laundry, whether it's yard work, whether it's, cleaning. For me, I was the email guy. I spent, most of my time in the email room, advocating for inmates with, the medical staff, the medical conditions they had, the warden, the assistant warden writing letters, just emails. They needed to get an X-ray, they needed to get an MRI, they needed a medication. I was very successful in that regard for inmates, and that helped me just pass the time, and gave me some purpose. And that's what you need in prison. You need to find some sort of purpose.
So one of the things that was also interesting to me was this idea that you told me solitary is very, very difficult. Tell me a little bit about why it's so difficult and how it was so impactful.
Well, I mean, for me, again, I can only speak for myself, but for me, just the silence, and the confinement, and the no interaction, the just being alone, being in such a tight space. I mean, I'm definitely claustrophobic. I've been out now almost 2 years. I don't allow anyone to close the door where I sleep anymore. I love the noise now. If I go to the doctor's office and they put me in the waiting room and they close the door, I get up and open. They walk by and they go to close it again. I said, listen, if you want to close the door, I'll sit in the waiting room. Tell me when the doc's coming in. I'm not sitting here with the door closed. I just don't like it. And that's an understatement. And it's just, listen, going to prison is like a long time out. You're in trouble as a kid, they put you in a corner and you go to timeout. And you go to timeout because they want you to think about what you did wrong. Prison is just one incredibly long time out. They put you in that cell and the only thing you can do is think about what you did wrong. And although that sounds healthy, after a while it could drive you crazy. I'm not even a big guy. I don't know how people even work out in there. I mean, I know they do. And I know what they do, but I mean, to do a push-up in there, I mean, it's tight, real tight, just to get down and do a push-up, as far as floor space is concerned. So it's just, too much time to be alone in my thoughts, and just nowhere to walk, nowhere, I mean, you're in there 23 and a half hours a day, you get out a half hour 3 days a week for a shower, that's it. And by the time you get out and take a quick shower, it's time to go back in, and again, those people that are institutionalized, they're like, okay, let's go, close the door, let me back in, and I can't wait to take my nap, type of thing. It's just a mental toughness that, quite frankly, it's hard for me to fathom.
So then you went into the halfway house, and you've always described this as, and again, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think it was prison light, if you will, in that it's not like you're free. There are all these other rules that kick into place. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're still under the BOP, Bureau of Prisons, and if you screw up in any way, shape, or form, they just call a car and you go back. I mean, there's no paperwork. There's nothing that needs to be done there. You walk a very fine line. However, there are people in prison who say that they rather serve the remainder of their time in prison. They don't even want to go to the halfway house. Many people. For me, though, the halfway house was a pleasure compared to prison, because you're able to go to work. So you wake up, you go to work, you come back, you get in your bed, you watch your TV on your phone, you go to bed, you do it again. And I work 6 days a week. But many others didn't go to work, and they're long days, right? But the biggest advantage that I felt I had in the halfway house, which honestly was huge, was the phone. I could escape in my thoughts by watching TV or movies in my free time. Kept to myself, socialized very, very little, and when I had a little free time, I'd work out. But you don't have to stand for count in the halfway house. You have count twice a day in prison, where you stand and you're counted. You don't have to do that in the halfway house. But you are accountable for all your movements. You can't go anywhere without checking in and checking out. Even if you're, during a work day and you stop for gas, you have to let them know, hey, I stopped at the Shell station and this and this. And then you got to call them as soon as you're leaving. Then you got to call them when you get to work. And then you got to call them before you work. Any movement, they got to be aware of. Halfway house coming out of prison is very different than halfway house that you would think of when you're talking about someone in recovery for substance abuse or something along those lines. Very, very different. Like I said, and if you're late, if you're at work and you're running late, you got to call them. You got to put your boss on the phone. They got to tell them, hey, Alex, running late. Well, how late? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then you got to call again. So it's very controlled. But for me, it was a pleasure. It was a tremendous reward to be able to serve 9 months in a halfway house. You can get anywhere from 3 to 9 after being released from prison, and I got 9, so I was very lucky. But the people that are institutionalized, they'll tell you they'd rather stay in prison and serve the remainder of their sentence there. It's just a very different mentality.
And one of the things that struck me was, at a halfway house, you can't choose your job. They assign you a job. Is that right?
No, that's not true. They have to
okay.
approve, they have to approve your job, but you have say.
Can you say, I want to be a salesperson?
You could say that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you can say that. You have to get it approved, and you better move fast, because if you don't have one very quickly, they'll assign one for you. They have people that they work with that'll get jobs. But you have some say. There's certain things you can't do. You can't own your own business. You can't be your own boss, different things like that. You got to work for somebody. And again, I would say that varies on the halfway house. I can only speak on the experience from mine. I know that sounds crazy. You would think all would be the same.
Right.
But I really think that that's exactly accurate. I think everybody's a little different.
Now, the founder that you've talked about, who's in prison, I believe, he comes out. He's a billionaire. Talk to me a little bit about, again, obviously you can't speak to his experience, but does he get to go, look, I'm not going to work for 25 cents or $25 or whatever it is. I'm a billionaire. This money means nothing to me. Can he go, I don't want to work for someone. I'll just sit it out and I don't need the money?
Well, that attitude will get you nowhere. No, you can't. However, so if he was my age and he had the same money, that attitude would be very problematic. But because he's his age, which I think he's like 78, 79, 80, I'm not sure about this, Darshan, but I don't think at that age, I don't think he'll have to work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a choice at some point. You still have rules, but those rules are not the same necessarily.
Because of his age. That's the only thing that will get him out of work, will be his age. And the fact that, he's way past the age of retirement. But if he was my age, he would have to go to work.
And we've sort of explored your journey throughout. Talk to me about where you are today.
In a tough place, which I'm sure there's a lot of people out there saying, good, we want you to be in a tough place. We don't like what you did and we want you to pay. I'm going to pay for the rest of my life. Is it my goal to get in a better place? Of course it is. And I'm trying feverishly to do that. But it's not easy. And again, it's not supposed to be, right? I'm a convicted felon. Mentally, I'm in a better place because I no longer obsess about money. I'm much clearer as far as where my priorities lie as it relates to being happy. I am also much clearer as far as knowing, how to live life, the right way. How to ensure that you don't break the rules and live in the gray and cross lines that could potentially get you in trouble. I lived that way my whole life. And the inner turmoil of living that way can be exhausting. You do it long enough, you might get used to it. But honestly, I never got completely used to it. I found it to be tiring. So I don't live that way anymore. And I come across opportunities every day that are in the gray and I pass them up. And, some might say it would be easier to take those financially. It would be, but I'd be right back in the same boat. And it's not even, I don't even feel the pressure. It's a no-brainer. So I love that clarity. So in that regard, I'm in a much better place. But as far as the day-to-day stuff, it's tough. I'm just looking to find my way in the world as the new Alec Burlakoff. I do these podcasts, which I love. I like to share my story. I think I can make a difference to young people who are driven by money and think that is the holy grail. I like them to think twice before they pursue it in the likes that they're going to find happiness. I like to do speaking. I spoke at the University of Washington. I'm speaking at USC April 21st, speaking at Miami-Dade College. I enjoy those things. Are those venues going to keep the lights on? Most likely not. So I need to continue to figure out ways to generate revenue. But I like to think that I'm finding my way slowly but surely. Finding a way for myself, Alec Burlakoff, to be comfortable in these new shoes that I find myself in.
And any parting words on that note, Alec?
No, I just hope that listen, I thank you for having me. It's been fun. I enjoy talking about it. But most importantly, I hope it'll make a difference to somebody, even if one person. Then it's worth the time. And that's it.
How can people reach you?
You can email me. You can schedule a 20-minute consult. We can talk about anything. I do consulting, small businesses, startups, group calls, one-on-one, targeting, messaging, closing. I'll even get on and actually negotiate a contract. But you can email me at training@aburlakoff.com, training@aburlakoff.com. Contact me any way you want. I'm open, and I'm glued to my phone. I picked that habit up, back in the day when I was, flying high in pharmaceuticals, and I still can't let it go. So maybe that's something I'm going to work on in the future, but it's not happening anytime tomorrow. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Alec, thank you again for coming on.
All right. Thank you very much, Darshan.